Welcome to the Alaska Weather Show. I'm meteorologist Peter Chan, coming to you from the National Weather Service on this Monday, March 13th, 2023. And if you'd like additional weather information, you can always go to weather.gov. That is the National Weather Service's online presence. It'll bring you to the map of the continental U.S. with Alaska and Hawaii to the lower left. Let's take a look now at what's going on across the country. You point and click anywhere on this map. It'll pull up the forecast along with any relevant watches, warnings, or advisories. A lot of action going on in the Northeast. We have a nor'easter that's producing some very heavy wet snow over parts of New England. New York State, as much as 30 inches of heavy wet snow could fall with this storm. Further south, in the wake of it, colder air, widespread freezing temperatures across the Tennessee Valley into portions of the deep South and Carolinas, so very cold temperatures there. Out to the west, a scattering of winter weather advisories and winter storm warnings across parts of the central northern Rockies, and we still have ongoing issues with the atmospheric river that has been impacting California. It's been a series of systems since this weekend, expected to continue for at least another day or so. Here in Alaska, well, we're watching a push of colder air work its way down through the Bering Strait, the eastern Bering Sea and the west side of the state, bringing windy conditions, colder temperatures, and some snow showers. Not heavy snowfall, but nonetheless enough to blow around in the Yukon and Kuskokwim deltas, and then especially the eastern Aleutians and across the lower half of the Alaska Peninsula as we go through now through tomorrow and into Wednesday in those further south and east areas. There will be a period of some heavier snow over the eastern Kenai on Tuesday. That could impact areas around Whittier, up through Portage Glacier and around Turnagain Pass. And then a winter storm watch has been issued for the northern panhandle, the Icy Strait Corridor, Hoonah, Juneau, northward through Yakutat for late Tuesday night, Wednesday into late Wednesday night. And if that's not enough, once they get the snow there in the northern panhandle, warmer air is going to surge north and westward across the panhandle into the northeastern Gulf, and temperatures could warm back up into the 40s later Friday and especially by Saturday, panhandle all the way up to Yakutat. So looking at some of the FAA webcams this afternoon, Gamble there on the north side of St. Lawrence Island. Winds have finally shifted around to the north and beginning to pick up. A little light snow falling with some blowing snow, temperature 10 degrees. That colder air is heading southeastward and will be moving across the eastern Aleutians and the Alaska Peninsula tomorrow into early Wednesday. Faults paths right now, just partly cloudy skies, but you have some heavier snow showers and gusty winds on the way for tomorrow into Wednesday. And then areas further east, here's Portage Glacier, could be picking up some heavier snowfall by this time Tuesday afternoon. Skies are clear right now and 21 degrees, but that snow will be kind of pulling in off of the Gulf as we go through the day on Tuesday. And then further east, Skagway in the northern panhandle is under a winter storm watch. That's for late Tuesday night and especially Wednesday into Wednesday night. As much as 8 to 16 inches of snow could fall around Skagway on up through White Chilkoot Pass. Skies, though, right now mostly clear and 28. So here is the current hazards map showing the winter weather advisories in effect from the western Seward Peninsula down through St. Lawrence, the southwest areas, including the YK Deltas, Nunavik Island, and then as that colder air presses further south, strong gusty north-northwest winds will produce heavier snow showers along the open waters of the Bering Sea, and that will create winter weather advisory conditions there for tomorrow into Wednesday afternoon. Further east, winter storm watch in effect for northeastern Gulf Coast, Yakutat, and the northern half of the Panhandle, Icy Strait Corridor, Juneau northward. That'll be late Tuesday night through late Wednesday night. Looking at the satellite imagery, we have low pressure out over the Gulf, but this is the potent system, not so much at the surface, but in the mid and upper levels of the atmosphere. See how strong of a curl there is in that cloud cover? That energy is diving southeastward. It's going to link up with the low sitting out here over the Gulf and consolidate into one broader low pressure circulation here over the western, southwestern Gulf as we go through tomorrow afternoon and on Wednesday. I used visible satellite imagery for this map today. Pretty cool. You can see the snow on the mountaintops of the Alaska Range, the Brooks Range, where skies are clear. Here we have scattered rain and snow showers mixed, a couple areas of weaker low pressure. Here comes this more potent system. It doesn't have a lot of snow with it, but as it works its way southeastward, it's going to pull the colder air down along the eastern half of the Bering Sea and the west coast, and then across the Alaska Peninsula and into the lower Gulf and North Pacific. And this is going to energize low pressure as it does so. Later tonight, we find low pressure taking shape, better shape here out over the western Gulf as that upper level energy merges with it. The low strengthens Tuesday afternoon. We see the next surge of moisture coming northward from out of the northeastern Pacific. And then finally, by Wednesday, we have the stronger system back here in the southwestern Gulf, east of Kodiak Island, included from a lot of moisture coming up in through the Panhandle, producing that heavier snowfall. And then eventually, warmer air is going to follow that up through southeast parts of the state later this week and into Saturday. So looking at low temperatures, below freezing even through the southern portion of the Panhandle. Quite cold, Copper River Basin, 11 below at Glen Allen, single digits even in the Anchorage Bowl, teens elsewhere through the Kenai. Tuesday afternoon highs will stay generally below freezing here, even along the Gulf Coast and South Central. There could be some heavier snow along areas of the eastern Kenai Peninsula, western Prince William Sound Tuesday. And then further off toward the south, temperatures could still get up above freezing, mid-upper 30s there in the southern Panhandle on Tuesday. But then Wednesday, lows not quite as cold with cloud cover in place and moisture streaming northward, snow breaking out through that area in that time frame. Temperatures where it stays near or below freezing, that's where the accumulating snow will be. Could make lower 40s Wednesday with even warmer air overspreading the Panhandle Friday into Saturday. You're going to see widespread 40s there. Meanwhile, colder in the far north, 20s and some 30s below here are possible Tuesday morning. Tuesday afternoon, temperatures in the single digits above zero along the Yukon River, but still below zero throughout the North Slope and Arctic coast. And then Wednesday morning lows could still be in the 20s with some isolated 30-degree below readings, such as Arctic Village back toward maybe Anatuvik Pass. And then on Wednesday afternoon, temperatures should stay below zero along the spine of the Brooks Range up through the North Slope and Arctic coast, even northern parts of the Seward Peninsula. And temperatures across the southwest interior, at least tonight into Tuesday morning, getting down a little below zero, below freezing even out toward Dutch Harbor. And then Tuesday afternoon, colder air is coming down in along the lower southeastern portion of the Bering Sea. Temperatures only near freezing, the Alaska Peninsula, mid-30s there at Dutch Harbor. And then Wednesday morning, look at that, temperatures down in the teens, gusty west-northwest winds, blowing snow as well, accumulating snow in these areas where the winter weather advisories are in effect through Wednesday afternoon. And temperatures Wednesday should stay below freezing in the eastern Aleutians across the Alaska Peninsula. And a quick check, temperature outlook March 19th through the 23rd, just past the equinox. Near normal southern areas, central and northern portions of the mainland, a little above normal and then a little below normal expected across the Panhandle. Precipitation could average a bit above normal in the west and a little below normal then back across the southeast and in through areas of the Panhandle.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Well, let's take a look now at your aviation weather. If you have a flight planned either on Tuesday or Wednesday, the main weather feature that's going to be forming and taking shape and being the dominant circulation in the atmosphere will be an area of low pressure North Pacific and south of the Kodiak Island. This will be the pivot point by which other systems kind of pull back across the Gulf, and colder air initially is driven southward across the eastern half of the Bering Sea. We expect IFR conditions along especially the Bering side of the Alaska Peninsula into the eastern Aleutians Tuesday morning, pockets of IFR in the southwest interior. Also a little bit showing up there along the north central Gulf Coast. That will expand westward into Prince William Sound Tuesday afternoon with IFR conditions continuing, especially along the north side of the Bering there of the Alaska Peninsula and into the eastern Aleutians. Starting Wednesday morning, though, we have another piece of energy and moisture that's going to be circulating around a broader area of low pressure that's over the western Gulf. That's going to pull moisture up up into the Panhandle and eventually warmer air later on in the week that'll be retrograding back toward the north and west here by, say, Thursday, Friday, and into the upcoming weekend. But with the precipitation, and some of it will include accumulating snow over central northern portions of the Panhandle, we expect IFR conditions to expand. That happens Wednesday afternoon, widespread IFR across much of the Panhandle, along the northern Gulf Coast into Prince William Sound and down toward the entrance of Cook Inlet, while IFR conditions persist on the Bering side of the tip of the Alaska Peninsula and eastern Aleutians. Anaktuvuk Pass for Tuesday will generally be VFR. That'll be the case just a nudge east at Adigan Pass there and through the Brooks Range. Further south, west arm of the Alaska Range, VFR, Lake Clark and Merrill. And as we round on up, Rainy Pass, VFR, as well as Windy Pass. Further east, Isabel will also see VFR conditions, but Mentasta Pass toward the Alcan border may have a little bit of VFR conditions, MVFR conditions there during the day. Tuesday, further south and west, Tanita Pass, VFR. And then, as I mentioned, Portage Pass is going to see IFR conditions try to back into the east entrance or eastern portion of that pass come Tuesday afternoon from off of Prince William Sound. Further east, we have Chilkoot and White in the far northern Panhandle may have a little MVFR conditions. Conditions will deteriorate across the Panhandle Tuesday night, and especially on Wednesday when we anticipate more widespread IFR conditions to take hold as the next push of moisture and precipitation that will be falling in that region. Surface freezing line runs from out in the western Aleutians through the lower Bering Sea across in the vicinity of, say, Dutch Harbor, south of Kodiak Island, then nudges back up into the southeastern Gulf to along the southwestern outer portion of the Panhandle, and then bump up aloft 2,000 to 4,000 feet generally south of the central Aleutians. Now, looking at the areas of some icing, nothing too terribly heavy, but downwind of the especially southeastern Bering Sea with the cold air advecting in across this region, we expect some snow showers, so above 3,000 feet, and then also areas of the Gulf and just southwest of Haida Gwaii, we expect some areas of isolated moderate icing above 3,000 feet. At jet stream level, 30,000 feet, broad circulation over the southwest and in through the western portion of the Gulf. Backside of it, a strong jet core, 120, 125 knots out of the northeast, pulling down the colder air at the surface. And at 700 millibars, 9,000 feet, we see that low circulation over the western Gulf. It's going to reset a little further south and west, helping to pull other systems up along the northeastern Pacific into the eastern part of the Gulf. That is going to bring the next weather system in through the Panhandle here Tuesday night, Wednesday into early Thursday. Backside, plenty of cold air coming on down. And as we get the maps here now at the 3,000 foot level, below 850 millibars, low circulation here over the southwest Gulf, another one just southwest of Haida Gwaii. But notice the broad northeasterly to north wind flow over the eastern Bering, west side of the state. This is drawing down the colder air that's going to wrap southeastward eventually. And as a result, we expect widespread turbulence, moderate turbulence across much of the western portion of the state, up through the Yukon River Valley with those northeasterly winds at the surface and aloft. We could see isolated severe turbulence, especially from around St. Matthew south to St. Paul and across areas of the gaps in through the eastern Aleutians and through the southern portion of the Alaska Peninsula from the surface to 4,000 feet, and then another little area of moderate turbulence along the northwestern Gulf.
Welcome to this edition of Alaska Weather Facts. I'm meteorologist Carrie Haisley, Chief of the Emergency Services and Multimedia Branch for the National Weather Service in Anchorage. With me today, I have Dr. Doug Wesley, a physical scientist for the National Weather Service Alaska Region Headquarters. Doug, thank you so much for joining us today.
You're welcome, Carrie. Hello.
Hello. So you're here to talk to us a little bit about something called CocoRAS, which is the Community Collaborative Rain, Hail, and Snow Network. And I understand that CocoRAS is a network of volunteers who take weather observations. Can you tell us a little bit more about what CocoRAS is?
Yes, it began in the lower 48, 20 some years ago, and it's expanded during those 2 decades. They're getting something like 10 to 15,000 rainfall reports per day from the lower 48.
Wow, that's a lot of different reports. So how many reports do we get in Alaska right now?
Well, it varies. Maybe 10 to 25. But if you consider the large areas we're talking about, we have a lot of gaps to fill. Any observation is better than no observation, but there are large areas in Alaska. Alaska covers 3 million square miles. There's a lot of data gaps in that space, so we'd like to enhance it.
Sure. So tell us then a bit about why these observations are so important to Alaska and why we need to expand the number of them that we're getting.
Yes, Alaska, as you know, has large areas with a lot of complex terrain, and there are no weather observing stations or radar. So CoCoRaHS can help fill the data gaps, so you can at least get some idea of what's actually falling from the sky at those locations. CoCoRaHS increases the amount of timely weather observations available to meteorologists and other decision makers, especially in hazardous type of weather, both rain and snow and the occasional hailstorm that we get up here. CoCoRaHS observations can help forecasters identify long-term precipitation and snowfall trends in a climate sense. And just overall, they increase the amount of timely weather observations available to the public.
So then let's talk a little bit about each of the different types of observations. So it's the rain, hail, and snow network. So let's start by talking a little bit about rain observations and tell us a little bit about how you take those and how long it takes a volunteer to get a rain observation.
Okay, this is a 4-inch gauge, just the basic gauge, which you use for both rain and snowfall. But the rain observations are pretty quick. It's a matter of 2 to 3 minutes that each volunteer goes out and takes a reading, and then they enter these on the computer, and they're immediately available for observation on the computer and on the maps, so that you can see your report. In the wintertime, it's a little bit more complicated. We require the observers to measure not only the snow accumulation, but also liquid equivalent. So they've got to melt the snowfall. This involves 2 of these gauges and a snowboard. And it's maybe a 10-minute observation per day during the winter. But the snowfall is so variable that even across town and in especially the remote areas, it's crucial that we increase this number of snow observations in the network.
Right. I understand that we can only take observations in places where we have weather service offices, and so we rely on all of these volunteers to help us fill gaps. And it's also interesting to know how snowfall varies across like large spaces or even small cities. So I notice here in Anchorage, for example, we can have a vastly different amount of snow on the east side of town and the west side of town. And so it seems like these observations would help us to better understand what's going on in places besides just where the office is.
That's correct. In any given snowfall, there are typically large variances, as you know, and we rely on reports from the public and from National Weather Service cooperative spotters to map out the snowfall that occurs so that we can predict it better in the future.
Sure. So we talked about rain observations and we talked about snow observations. And you said for each of those, if it's rain, it only takes a couple minutes, and then it can take about 10 minutes if it's snow. Hail was the other one that we didn't talk about yet. Tell us just a little bit about the hail observations that CoCoRaHS observers take.
Yeah, the CoCoRaHS network, it has a hail pad, and it's just a simple block of styrofoam covered with aluminum foil, and you can approximate the size of hail by measuring the dent that the hail causes on the pad, and this can give us an estimate of hail size. We don't get hail very often in Alaska, but I've seen it 2 or 3 times in my 5 years in Anchorage, and some of it up to a ½ inch, and I'm sure there's been larger hail up in the interior at times.
So let's talk a little bit about how these rain, hail, and snow observations can help forecasters. So we have people who forecast the weather, and we also have people who work on the hydrology side, and I can see that maybe CoCoRaHS will be beneficial to both of them. Can you tell us a bit more about that?
Yes, it's beneficial to the hydrologic forecaster who's concerned about flooding, and rainfall comprises one of the causes of a flood, or it can exacerbate high water conditions. So the more the hydrologist has to look at in terms of data from recent rainfall, the more information they have to work with when they're generating a forecast. The weather forecasters in the wintertime at the Weather Service office can use these observations also to help with past case studies, to verify model data, and to get a handle on what's actually happening out the window. And that's important in the forecast process.
Yeah, it seems like you can never have too much information when you're issuing a forecast. So it only takes a few minutes most of the time to take these observations. So let's say I'm interested in becoming a volunteer for CocoRa's. How do I get involved?
Yeah, the website is very useful, cocoras.org, and it has a number of video-based training tutorials that take you right on from measuring rainfall to a video tutorial on measuring snowfall. It has the maps available in real time, and you can go back and look at that old data too through those maps. And so it's a very useful, comprehensive website.
Very interesting. And anybody can get involved, right? You don't have to be a meteorologist.
That's right. And, we love to have 24, once a day reports throughout the year, but if you can't, then so be it. And we have observers, some observers are out of town for periods of time, or maybe they can only report, a week or two of precipitation, but it's still useful. It's still data that we look at. So the more the better, but you can get involved even if you aren't at a location 24/7.
Doug, I really appreciate you coming on to our program today to talk about CocoRa's. Hopefully we can have you back in the studio at some point so we can talk more about it and then talk more about the different types of observations and the tools that observers use.
That would be great, yeah.
So thank you for your time, and thank you so much for joining this edition of Alaska Weather Facts.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Welcome back. Let's take a look at now your sea ice edge, and across areas of the north, extensive ice in place. We're not expecting especially strong winds along the Arctic coast, though there will be stronger winds passing through the Bering Strait that could cause some of the ice to shift around through this area of the west coast. And then further south, gale force northerly wind flow Tuesday and Wednesday will cause the ice to drift further southward, plus the colder air advecting into this region could cause the ice to try to redevelop a bit, even though we're kind of past the season for really good ice formation. With the push of colder air here, at least through midweek, we could expect a little bit more in the way of some ice development. For the marine forecast for the southeast panhandle, inner channels, winds out of the north 15 knots, especially Petersburg up through Lynn Canal, 3-foot waves or so. Along the outer Gulf Coast, near shore waters within 15 nautical miles of shore, look for 15 to 20 knot southeasterly winds, as much as 25 to 35 knots as you get up toward Yakutat and westward. Waves generally running around 5 or so feet. And then on Wednesday, ahead of a frontal band, a stronger impulse that'll be riding up out of the Gulf. This is going to bring areas of widespread precipitation in the form of accumulating snow across the icy strait corridor on up through Yakutat. Winds will be out of the southeast, south 15 to 20 knots, waves 3 to 4 feet, most of the inner channels. Outer channels, waves building upwards of 12 and 13 feet. For the northwestern Gulf, we'll see winds in the lower half of Cook Inlet as high as 30 knots from the north with 8 to 10-foot waves. Off the Kenai, northeast winds 20 knots, waves 4 feet. And in Prince William Sound, we expect winds northeasterly 25 knots with 6-foot waves, and there could be some heavier snowfall along especially eastern side of the Kenai Peninsula during the day on Tuesday. By Wednesday, winds will be upwards of 35 knots south of Cordova in the far corner up here in the north central central Gulf, but otherwise north winds 30 knots continue through the lower portion of Cook Inlet with 8 to 9 foot waves. Winds out of the east 20 knots with 4 foot waves expected in Prince William Sound. Across the Alaska Peninsula and Kodiak Island, winds will go north to northwest and increase to 30 knots, especially south and west of Chiknik. We expect waves in the sheltered areas on the North Pacific side around 4 feet, but once you get on the Bering side, 9 to 13 foot waves, and the winds will build into the day on Wednesday. Highest winds will be out there along the southern portion of the Alaska Peninsula and through the eastern Aleutians. North winds to 35-knot gales, along with some heavier snow showers, some blowing snow. So definitely colder regime. Air temperatures will remain below freezing across these areas here during the midweek. For the eastern Aleutians on Tuesday, north-northwest winds 30-35 knots. Highest waves on the north side of the islands and through the lower Bering 15 to 16 feet. Lighter winds out toward the western Aleutians, north 15 to 20 knots or so. Waves 5 to 7 feet. And then on Wednesday, gale force winds continue over the eastern Aleutians, 35 to 40 knots with highest waves on the Bering side, given the northern component to the wind, and waves of 15 to 17 feet. Along the southwest coast, over the ice, winds 30 knots out of the north, as high as 35-knot gales. North-northwest winds vicinity of St. Paul. This is going to cause the ice to want to push further south, and with the colder air advecting southward, it's possible there could be a little ice redevelopment along the edge there. And northerly gales continue at 35 knots on Wednesday. North winds within Norton Sound and off of the south end of St. Lawrence Island about 25 knots. For the far Arctic coast, winds will be out of the west 10 to 15 knots, but turn northerly, increase to 30 knots passing through the Bering Strait, west side of the Seward Peninsula and north side of St. Lawrence Island. There could be some shifting of ice in these areas where the winds are a bit stronger. And then on Wednesday, we expect southwest winds 15 to 20 knots from Kaktovik down through Utqiagvik and Point Lay. They turn back around more toward the north and increase to 25 knots there south of the Bering Strait and north side of St. Lawrence Island during the day on Wednesday. Quick check of the synoptic map. As I was mentioning, a potent mid and upper level system is currently riding southeastward along the west side of the state, and that will emerge over this region, and that's going to help spin up a stronger area of low pressure over the western and southwestern Gulf Tuesday into Wednesday. And as the moisture surges northward, warmer temperatures, that's going to create heavier snow in the northern part of the Panhandle and northeastern Gulf. And this system will eventually bring warmer air in along the Panhandle into the 40s. It could get up into the 40s as far west as Yakutat by the time we get into Saturday, and temperatures should moderate a bit over the weekend over South Central.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.